Hello, my name is Leif Larson from Mission Control on Puget Sound in downtown Seattle. I'm your host for the Salesfolks Podcast, where we interview everyday salespeople who have achieved extraordinary results in the field of sales. I am thrilled to share with you today's guest. He is a sales coach, a consultant, but he's also a leading sales thought leader who has helmed several businesses. No sales theory here, folks. Our guest has lived sales. And he's been a two-time National Salesperson-of-the-Year. Can you tell us who you are?
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction. You've managed to make me look old, which I am, Leif. So, having been around this long, but Kelly Riggs, I'm the founder of Business Locker Room Incorporated. I've been doing this now for 17 years, and I named my company Business Locker Room for what I hope is obvious reasons. I think that sales and business in general is a contest. I've never known anybody that cashed a second place commission check. So I think it's in our best interest to compete, and my background as an athlete kind of lends itself to that. But former two-time National Salesperson of the Year for an orthopedic company way back several decades ago, and have been doing what I'm doing for a long time. Really, really enjoy what I do.
Great. How did you get started in sales?
Well, my path to sales I don't recommend. I was going to college playing college football. I had a full scholarship, and I was in a curriculum to be an electrical engineer. And after I got to a class called differential equations, Leif, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so strangely enough, I left the university. I decided to give up football because I wasn't all that good at it in the first place, although it was a great experience. Decided to marry my high school sweetheart and went and got a sales job. So you can imagine my parents, you did what? You're not going to be an engineer? You're going to be a salesman. Wow.
That's a great story. I think like so many of us, sales wasn't necessarily our original intention, but it ended up becoming a calling. We get sort of pulled there. There's some kind of interesting gravitational force that happens. I always ask guests, is there nobility in the sales profession? When I grew up, and I'm in my late 40s, but when I was growing up, there was this concept that, salespeople were, pushy, used car salesman type of mentality. They're trying to get you to buy things that you don't want to. But with the advent of solution selling over the last couple of decades, I really wanted to get your take on, what's great about the sales profession and why is it noble?
Well, what you alluded to is the past impressions of salespeople was one of the reasons why my parents and others looked at me like, what are you doing? You gave up a profession to go be a salesperson. What are you thinking? Is there nobility in selling? Absolutely. I think it's the greatest profession there is for a number of reasons, but clearly it suffers from bad impressions and perceptions of the public, and it's because bad, lazy salespeople create those perceptions. But the good ones, the true professionals that pursue it as a calling, who are out there to genuinely provide help and support for people in need, it's an incredible profession to be in, Leif. You get to run your own business, typically, without all of the investments of business. I tell salespeople all the time, you don't have to buy inventory, pay rent and utilities, buy the insurance. You get to go run a franchise business, and you get to do that without all of the expense. And you have the opportunity to do what good businesses do. That's to impact the community and other businesses in a very positive way. And I think it's an opportunity for us to bring a lot of light and good things to business. But it's the bad salespeople that create all the drag against that.
Yeah, that's well put. I really like the low overhead piece of that. Just to sort of double click on that and look a little bit deeper at that. So there's got to be something, if it's not necessarily capital that you're bringing towards that or that overhead. There probably is, though, in terms of the amount of sweat equity, the energy, the focus that you have to put into that. So you are investing something pretty significant into bringing success to the businesses or the products and services that you're representing. I had read some things from you that I thought were really interesting. You talked openly about how technology has caused a bunch of distractions that incrementally add up each month, to days worth of lost productivity for salespeople. And I think about focus and discipline and not letting those outside distractions get in the way of your success. And I was really nodding my head when I was reading that from you, because I think we're all guilty of this, right?
Yes.
There's a little bit of baked in ego into some of this. So you're like looking at LinkedIn or other social media and saying what's going on here. And I think that there's a healthy dose of that you can probably engage with, but
Sure.
we're just doing too much of it very often. And it's like, what construct have you built that allows you to bring a ton of focus into your daily sales practice, and how do you maintain that focus? Not letting those distractions get in the way of your success.
Well, I think the first step, Leaf, is awareness. There's many times that I will tell a group of people that we're working with or I'll ask them, what is your most valuable asset? And you can imagine the things that they come up with. And eventually we get to the idea that, listen, the most valuable asset you have by far and away is your time. And it's very easy to illustrate. If you're the greatest salesperson on planet Earth in your particular area of expertise, and I give you 0 time in front of customers or prospects, you're not going to sell anything. We tend to be very cavalier as professional salespeople with our time, because we have that latitude and that flexibility to kind of pursue what we want. But it's interesting that the most common request that I get from business owners is, hey, can you come in and talk to my people about time management? Well, yes. But it's not a time management issue. It's a time prioritization issue. It's what do you feel to be the most important thing that you need to be doing at any given moment. And those distractions are two sides of the same coin. We all know that technology on one hand is incredible. It enables solo people like myself to run very robust businesses with all of the tools and techniques and talents that we have. We can use technology to leverage those things. But on the other hand, they can be huge distractions, and I can spend myself spending a lot of time doing things that aren't really in the best interest of running my business. And so I think for most people, you have to first create a discipline based on awareness that, listen, my time is so valuable. If I could make one more productive call, and by that I mean sitting down in front of a potential prospect or customer and having a meaningful conversation, if I could just do that one more time a week, we'd be talking about 50 more meaningful conversations a year, and that's just one, right? Wow. If you could do that 2 or 3 times a week, once a day, I mean, suddenly your productivity is through the roof. But it takes planning and discipline to make that a reality, and sadly, I think that's one of the areas that typically salespeople struggle with.
That's really interesting. I'm sure you've heard of this before because it's been applied to a lot of other areas, but there's this so-called rule of 80-20, and I wonder if like 80% of your overall success acceleration happens within that 20% of extra effort that you're putting in, whether that's discipline around your time management or maybe showing up a little bit longer. Some people
Sure.
decide that they're going to cut off at 5 o'clock and you show up a little bit longer, but that's a really interesting observation that you
well, if I may, let me connect those dots, because you said something about business people do bring sweat equity. You're absolutely right. That is the difference. What do great salespeople, the top 7%, as identified by Dave Curlin and Objective Management Group, or the top 10 or 15% of salespeople, what do they have in common? It's that sweat equity. It's that discipline. I mean, they approach it like running a business. It's not a job. I get up in the morning, I do what I do, and at the end of the day, I'm done and I go do something else, rinse and repeat 5 times a week. Business people, their whole life is invested in it because they have to make the payroll. They have to take care of all the details and lead employees and all that. Even though a salesperson is working by themselves, it's that sweat equity that really makes the difference. And how can you bring that to the table if you're cavalier with your time? It just makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah, that's so the antithesis then of cavalier is that you're what? Like, are you militant about it or
disciplined?
Disciplined. Okay.
Yes.
It's a tremendous amount of discipline. What is the most powerful lesson that you've learned about sales?
Man, that's a great question. I would tell you off the top of my head, the greatest lesson I've learned is that you shouldn't try to do it by yourself. I've owned multiple companies, and I've been a salesperson, I've been a sales leader, all those kind of things. And the biggest mistake I made early on is I felt like I had to do it all myself in order to really be seen as capable and, all those kinds of things. And I think the best thing I ever learned along the way was that having a coach, a mentor, someone to come alongside, seeking out resources to help you grow your business, develop your business, all of those things. I think that's the best thing I've ever learned. Even today in my business of 17 years, I have a coach. I work with somebody that helps me with my business. And while I like to think maybe I'm pretty good at what I do, Leaf, the reality is the best players on the planet in any sport, they all have coaches. I think that applies to us in the sales world as well.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor and an analogy. I know that I loved playing basketball when I was younger, and that's how I got better, was just going out and finding the absolute best basketball players I could, because they raise your game. And I did so very early on in my entrepreneurial career as well. I didn't go looking for the millionaire mentors. I was looking for the billionaires, and was lucky to have two of them along the way. And it makes a ton of sense to get really, really good mentorship around you. And you're never too old to be coached, that's great to hear you saying that. You haven't hit some point where you're like, I don't have anything left to learn here. I've been doing this for, decades. You're still out there having coaches helping you as well.
The interesting thing is even if you were at the very, very top of your game, and you would claim, I think wrongly, that, I pretty much have this mastered. The reality is what we do is intersect with other human beings, and humans are prone to mistakes. Just like the great quarterbacks are always looking at their mechanics and their footwork and those kind of things. It's not that they don't know how to do those things. It's just easy to slide off into a bad habit through a lack of continual correcting and disciplined work and that kind of thing. Those kinds of words, my experience most recently is that those words tend to fall on deaf ears with all but just an elite group of people. It's become very common to go look for the easy way. And, one of the things that technology does clearly is allow people to make a lot of money in a lot easier fashion than you did 30 or 40 years ago. And I get that. There's an allure to that. But the average people like myself, we need a process, a methodology, a system, a discipline for creating consistent, replicable success. Success is not an accident. At least it's not for me. I have to work at it. So, having those things and doing them that way has enabled me to create that success. But it's a long game. So many people have that impatience. They want to be millionaires tomorrow. And God bless you if you can do that, and there are some that can, but I'm not one of them.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight, and that correlates well to something I'd heard just in the last month and a half here. But there's this idea that we have these goals, like we want to have tremendous success, and it's sort of a set of concentric circles. And inside of that success, we have a bunch of behaviors that we need to modify to be able to put in practice what it is that we need to achieve that success. But one of the missing pieces that a lot of people don't realize is that you have to be willing to change your identity. You have to be willing to grow into a new version of yourself.
That's right.
To have those other things happen. And that's something that I really got reflected back as I've read some of your body of work and things that you've talked about here. One of them, I love how you're like, enemy number one is whining. Stop whining. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I was in the process of writing the sales book that I have now. It's actually entitled "Quit Whining and Start Selling." I had no idea what I was going to call it. I was looking to give sort of a step-by-step guide to how to be successful in sales as a new person, because I remember starting new, I really struggled. I was so ignorant of what selling was when I first started at the age of 20. I didn't even know what a salesperson did or what their objectives were. It had to be explained to me. But my wife was working at then fiance was working at a place, and they needed a salesperson. And when they told me, it sounded really interesting. So I got, took that job. Why they hired me, Leaf, I have no idea. I had no qualifications. But as I was writing the book, I had someone that I was working with who helped me work through the process of finalizing it. Kind of, again, that coach model. He's like, hey, this is good material. You need to get this out. I said, I can't come up with a title. And we talked and we talked and talked. And one day we just were having a leisurely conversation about salespeople and their tendency to find excuses and blame for everything. And I said, we just need to tell salespeople to quit whining and just get after it. Just start selling, right? And he went, there's your title. And I went, wow, that's pretty pretentious as a title. But you know what I found is sales leaders love that title, because as sales leaders, typically, salespeople, they've got plenty of excuses. And as I say in the book, victims make terrible salespeople, just terrible.
So true. So true. What's the most powerful lesson that you've learned about customers?
I think, Leif, they're unpredictable. I mean, I think the minute that you think that you've got a customer figured out, you better look around and make sure that you test your assumptions. I think that we tend to, based on personal history, past experience, we tend to rely on our assumptions. That's the way our brains work, and we begin to think that we've kind of got customers figured out. I've also learned that one of those assumptions is I can't challenge a customer. I can't challenge their thinking or their philosophy or their how they perceive things. My experience is that buyers who really care about doing the right thing, the best thing, really moving their company forward, they actually are very much interested in different types of ideas and innovations and things of that nature. But the challenge is you have to help them navigate that change process, because like salespeople, customers, they don't like change either. And so I think one of the powerful lessons that I've learned is that through that thought process is you have to help potential customers navigate through the fears and the anxieties they associate with change. And if you don't do that, many times your biggest competitor is not another competitor. It's the idea of changing what I'm doing. I can't tell you how many times in my early career I had people say, Kelly, I want to be very honest with you. What you're showing us is better than what we have. It is. But we're going to hang tight right now. We're just going to stay with what we have. And I would walk out shaking my head like, that's the most bizarre statement I've ever heard. And then I realized that a lot of people were weighing the cost of doing the change and implementing a lot of new things against their personal comfort level at the particular time, and the results they're getting now are not great, but they're okay. And they just said, "Hey, I'm going to pass." That was a big aha moment for me.
Wow, yeah, that's really insightful. So, have you sort of baked in a model of change management where you're helping them with their own change management, or are you trying to position a sale in terms of that change management? Because I would think that as soon as you do that, it opens up a can of worms. Right now, you're looking at broadening the number of stakeholders in that organization that you may have to, sort of win over, as part of that sales flow. But this is an amazing insight. I've never thought about that. I've never heard that before, and that makes a ton of sense to me. I guess I'm sort of like old school, like BANT, like you're going through budget, and authority and need and timing and or conceptual selling, which you've talked about a little bit before, which has a bunch more evaluation criteria. Yes. But I've never heard anyone say about how is this going to force change on that business. It's amazing.
Well, I think it's critical, because despite what we may think that everybody makes decisions from a logical perspective based on numbers and budgets and efficiencies and performance and specs and all those things, sure, those things are important. There's no question about it. But ultimately, an individual is going to make a decision to purchase or not to purchase based on a number of things on their personal agenda. I mean, fear being one of the biggest motivators there are. What if I make the wrong decision? I'm up for a promotion. What if I blow it? What if it blows up my budget? What are other people going to think? Is this going to create a lot of issues for me? Am I going to spend weeks and weeks and weeks dealing with this, and then I won't get other things done? I think salespeople tend to work at a very high level, analytical, logical level a lot of times, not recognizing that something like change can be what sinks your battleship. And so just surfacing that conversation and admitting to your potential prospect, listen, there's things that are going to necessarily change. You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to integrate this solution into your processes and systems. What does that look like for you? And what kinds of problems does it present for you personally? Now suddenly we're talking about it. and I can show them how we can make it a lot easier in that process through our support, coming alongside, making things easier for them. I press the easy button for a customer. Typically, I can help them get over that hurdle. And now it's no longer an obstruction. People will, we talk about handling objections. Many of the objections that people have that cause them to say no, they never explicitly verbalize those. And change is one of them. I don't want to tell you, look, I like what you're doing, but it looks like a train wreck to me in terms of me and what I'm going to have to do and what I'm going to ask my people to do. And you know what? And not only that, by the way, your price is really high, so we're just going to hang tight. So what they come back and say is, my objection is your price is too high. Mm-hmm. And I buy that automatically, and I go back and tell the boss, the problem is, the reason I can't close deals is because my price is too high. Yeah. Well, no, it's not that your price is too high. Your value is too low, and they don't see a way to adapt and implement what you have in a way that's positive and productive for them. So they're going to throw out the easy one. That's the easiest way in the world to call it a day and usher you out the door.
Wow, that's really, really a great insight. I wonder if there's ways to sort of qualify for that, in your discussions, perhaps, asking them, around their perception around whether this could be valuable enough to be worth, efforts, or even possibly screening for, does this impact, your business, or, is there change involved with this? That may be an interesting qualifier, just to see if you can gain a little discovery out of that.
Sure.
Not to change the topic here, but I did want to ask you a little bit about speed. I've seen data that shows the time to response to leads and opportunity to be a critical factor in the probability of converting a customer, or perhaps better put, the inverse of that is that there's a decay rate of a lead that sort of falls off a cliff if it's taken too long for you to respond as a salesperson. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you're talking about two different types of things here, because a lot of what we read on social media, LinkedIn in particular, is being driven by people who operate in a SaaS-based atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting in front of a computer and I'm getting inbound leads, and we have a variety of ways that those come to me. And we know that people on the other side of that who are providing those leads are sitting at their computers, and we all, as a human race, and especially in our society today, we want everything now. We want it. We want to get our money immediately. We want our coffee immediately. We want everything now, and we want it the way we want it. I think in those scenarios, Leaf, there's no question that response time is going to play a role, because the quicker you can respond, you're responding when it's in their minds, it's top of mind, and so there's some energy associated with that. That if I go off and get involved in other things and then come back to it, and now you're just now getting back to me, I may lose some of that initial enthusiasm, or somebody else may cut in line. I think in the old school business to business world, i.e. the kind of salespeople who go out and call on people directly, manufacturing, distribution, professional services, a lot of things that have nothing to do with online computer services, I think the same sort of principle applies. You simply can't leave people in the lurch if they have an interest. The idea of marketing is to gain awareness and interest, and essentially then to reach out and say, hey, we want to talk to somebody. So if I sit on that for a while, I think I run the same kind of risk, but I think that time factor may be a little different. Computer-based responses tend to be much sooner, much quicker from my perspective. But I've yet to find a customer that doesn't care about responsiveness and timely response. So I think, generally speaking, the answer is yeah, there's something to be said for that.
Good. There's some research that shows that top performing salespeople listen to their prospects and customers more than they talk. How important are listening skills? Is that something that you've honed in on as part of your consulting practice and coaching?
Yes, but this is a trick question. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if someone asked me, as someone who develops salespeople, what's the most significant interpersonal skill that you have to have as a salesperson? What's the most significant skill that will drive your success? And the easy answer, and my typical answer was, you've got to be a great listener. I mean, all things being equal, the person who gets the best information, not just the technical stuff, but also the buying motivations and every other thing that goes into this process, is typically going to win the day. But there's a problem with that. And it's predicated on what kinds of questions you're asking. I've changed my mind dramatically in this regard. What great salespeople share as a commonality is the ability to ask really, really good questions that create dialogue, that reveal all kinds of things that we typically don't get in the standard interrogation. What do you use? How long have you had it? Is it under warranty? Do you have a contract? We interrogate. We don't really ask questions that provide insights. I think the most important skill that new salespeople need to hone and develop, which is difficult to do, by the way, is learning how to ask really great questions. Then when you ask the right questions, you're actually getting good information if you're doing a great job of listening. So yeah, listening, absolutely critical, but the right question, I think even more so.
So you got to hone your skills in sales investigation, not just what you're asking, but perhaps where is it that you're trying to get to in terms of an answer from the customer, and then reversing back into that formulation of the question.
Yes. I mean, the typical salesperson goes in to ask questions to help them determine what to sell. Mm-hmm. Buyers know this. That's why we can easily spot a salesperson because of the way they act, their initial approach, the kind of questions they ask. A true consultant, someone who's there to bring value to my business, is going to come in and ask questions that pertain to me, not to them. Because it's my problems, issues, challenges, realities of my everyday life as a business decision maker that matter. I don't really care about you, Mr. Sales Guy. I care about me. And if you're going to ask me a bunch of questions I know are designed to help you hone in on a place to sell me something, I'm not really interested. But if you've got some value to bring to me based on helping me improve my performance in my business and all that, I have time. I've sit on both sides of the table. As a business owner, I've had salespeople call on me. A guy comes in and sits down, Mr. Riggs, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about your business. I'm like, really? I don't have time to educate you about my business. If you don't understand business and what I do on a daily basis, that's where you need to go start. Mr. Riggs, what's keeping you up at night? Indigestion, typically. There's some of these age-old questions that people recognize as salesy. What are the two most significant challenges that you're concerned with? Those kinds of things. People know what I'm getting at. The ability to engage people in a real natural dialogue that just leads to a conversation that ultimately surfaces some things we can talk about, that's a skill that can be developed. I know that for a fact because as a guy who was going into engineering, I was a very black and white guy. I was great at asking interrogation questions, not so much at creating dialogue. So you can learn how to do it, but it requires a lot of practice.
Yeah, that I'm still getting better at it, and I've been doing it for 26 years now. So,
absolutely,
yeah,
same.
I'm still trying to figure out what is the best way I can help to understand with empathy what problems this customer has that I may be able to add value to, and also being, I guess, self-aware of running into the fact that it's quite possible I may not, and if
right.
I can't, then helping to direct them in the right direction. So it isn't the ultimate goal isn't built on how do I get a sale here, how do I get my my commission, but rather how do I help add value to this person, and being okay with the fact that I may not, and keep focusing on where you can help add value. When you think about salespeople or sales leaders that you admire, who comes to mind and why? And this doesn't have to be someone that's famous, but who in your life from a sales standpoint really just comes to mind when you think about someone that is amazing?
I tend to have deep admiration for people who are real students of the game. I mean, it's what they want to do and be. I mean, it truly is a profession. We live in a world in selling that does not require certifications or degrees or anything. And then the subset of people who are trying to get incrementally better every day at what they do. Those are the people that blow me away. And a couple of people come to mind that I know of. One gentleman that I know is named Larry Levine, and I've watched his career from afar. Larry was very successful in the world of copier sales. Did a phenomenal job, and some years ago kind of ventured off into the space that I'm in, working with sales professionals, helping them get better. And he wrote a book called Selling from the Heart, and he's created a movement out of this, that his whole passion is that selling needs to be character-based and truly authentic in how you build relationships. It's not just transactional, and it's not just using a customer to achieve an end. And he's finding in his work that he's just honed in on this one idea. Some people will hone in on certain aspects of selling, and they'll teach and teach and teach that because that's their expertise, closing or presentation skills or whatever. This is his niche, and he does it so well. And it's so cool to watch, for me anyway, someone take something they're passionate about and bring it into the sales world and build something around it that's really caught fire with a tremendous audience. Another guy kind of like that is a guy by the name of Jeff Bajorek, and I've watched him from afar take a successful sales career and decide that his passion is to get out and help and train and support new salespeople and help them grow and develop. A guy that pursues this with this incredible passion, wants to be good at it, and really cares about. In both of those cases, these are men who are trying to help others, and I guess that's what appeals to me about it. Is how selfless they are in trying to take that message and take their skills and create the next generation of high-value salespeople. They're not out teaching tricky closes and all that kind of thing. They're really trying to help people see how this profession can really enrich the business world and enrich the world in general. I just have great regard for that.
I do as well. We all have a choice in how we spend our time and what we're going to work on every day. And the idea that you're trying to help other people and add that value. If you bring that to your game, I think you just end up doing a lot better in the long run because of it. And it's more sustainable. You'll be able to weather ups and downs a little bit better as well because you're, I think, prioritizing the right thing. What are you selling these days? And how is that going? I mean, you've got a coaching practice, you have a consulting practice, you're a well-known author within the sales space. But what are you working on these days, and what value are you adding to your clients?
Well, I'm kind of a fish out of water in some ways because most marketing people would tell you need to get into a singular space, really focus on a niche, become an expert in that field. Sadly, I do exactly the opposite. I work in three major categories. I train salespeople, business development people, but I also work with extensively and train in leadership development, executive coaching, that kind of thing. And I also do a whole lot of strategic planning. What's interesting about that, Leaf, is those things intersect in every business. And so many times I'll find myself eventually working in all three areas with a client because one leads naturally to another. And there's always seems to be an entry point. People will say, who's your ideal client? What's that ideal client profile for you? It's people who need organizational help of some kind. I've actually been called an organizational therapist, because there's so many problems and challenges and issues to diagnose and to find ways to fix those. Strategic planning is certainly a way that you can do that. Strategic planning is one of those things it's not highly regarded, frankly, by a lot of people because they sort of equate it with going to an offsite for 3 days and playing golf and doing a bunch of ideation and filling up a bunch of notebooks that are gathering dust on the shelf over here, but we're not really doing anything different. It's certainly not the way I approach strategic planning. Strategic planning, is designed to create change. I think the one thing I'm trying to bring to clients that I'm really focused on right now is not just being a teacher or a coach, but helping them actually facilitate the process of changing things that they're doing so that they can actually get different results. I mean, outside-in training is in most cases not terribly effective. In fact, I've said it from many platforms and said it in many articles and so forth. Sales training is really not very effective. It's not because we don't know what people need to do. It's because the process of change to do things different is dramatically difficult. And we're systemically set up against creating that change inside of organizations. Just the way we train salespeople. What do we do? Think of the standard organization. Bring in a new sales guy, Lee Florson. We're going to bring you in. What do? We do HR onboarding. That takes a couple hours. Sign your papers, get your computer logins, all that. Then we immediately start teaching you the product. Product. We also teach you how our CRM works and our workflow processes and all that. Then we hand you a list of potential clients or current customers or whatever. And we say, now get out there and sell. What do you think I'm going to do based on that? I'm going to go out and try to sell product. I'm going to push product, which is antithetical to what people want.
Yep.
Sales training is grossly ineffective because the system is broken. It's not because we don't know how to do it. It's that the reinforcement and the methodologies internal to any particular organization are flawed. But getting people to change, Leaf, it's unbelievable. They'll even admit those are problems, but they don't systemically change.
So in that construct, is it like a framework and a playbook then that you're helping them to develop that's going to take them away from just necessarily pushing product and
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to change the premise of what we're doing. I say there's basically three kinds of salespeople. The first one's what I call a professional visitor. Somebody shows up, they got a great joke and a box of donuts, and you love these people, but they rarely get any business. But you love them; they're awesome, right?
Yeah.
Then there's the big bell curve is the product pusher. They show up and they're there to talk product because the sales manager said you got to sell. The other side from the professional visitor, a very small group of people, is professional consultants. They're there to help you diagnose and solve issues and problems, bring real value to your organization, and make you look good in the process. And those people are extraordinarily rare. According to the data that's out there, 7% of all salespeople are the elites of selling. 7%. Another 16% do okay. They could do better with coaching and training. 77% are failing. They're not doing well. In fact, not my words, but the research that comes out, the bottom 25%, 1 out of 4, think about this, 1 out of 4 are considered to be hopeless.
That's absolutely stunning to me, considering that in most businesses, sales is the single largest cost center of the business, and the risk of onboarding, socializing, training, and deploying a salesperson if they're basically set up for or they themselves are set up for failure, or they themselves are not willing to undergo the change that's required to do that. I can't even imagine how much capital gets wasted around the wrong folks. Wow,
billions of dollars.
Oh boy, that's just incredible. Kelly, you've been so gracious with your time here, and I know that you're just absolutely swamped here, starting 2023, coming out of the gate here. So I'm not going to eat up any more of your time here, but you have been so insightful. I'm so grateful for the time and the ideas and lessons that you've learned that you've shared with us here today. Special thanks to you for taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'm grateful. So I just want you to understand that. I also want to thank all of our listeners. Now get out there and learn a little bit more about what we're doing here by visiting Kelly's site. You can go to Kelly Riggs, and he also has the Business Locker Room as well. Do you want to mention that URL or that domain, Kelly?
Yes, it's bizlockerroom.com, just like it sounds, bizlockerroom.com.
bizlockerroom.com. Go there if you want to try and connect with Kelly directly. Thank you to our listeners. Get out there and put some of this into practice here, and have a great day, everyone. Get out there and sell.
Thank you.
Thank you.